Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras, here with ILTV's Morning Briefing. In a somewhat unprecedented move, the Palestinian Authority is now trying to either remove or expel Israel from the United Nations over the recent passage of the nation-state law. This, just after last year's failed attempt to oust Israel from international soccer organization FIFA. The last time such a motion was brought before the UN, though, was in 1974 against apartheid South Africa. South Africa was never fully expelled, but it was suspended for many years. Now the motion is not even remotely expected to pass, but it would be a profound moment for the Palestinian propaganda. To pass either an expulsion or suspension, the UN would need to pass the Palestinians' motion by a 2/3 majority vote in the General Assembly, as well as get 9 votes at the Security Council, including all 5 permanent members. The permanent members include the United States, Russia, China, Britain, and France, at least one of which would be sure to kill the motion dead in its tracks. But the Muslim and Arab nation-states of the world have a de facto majority in the General Assembly. So while the motion overall wouldn't be enacted, it could still pass in the GA, causing a public scene that would no doubt be viewed as a major victory for pro-Palestinian and BDS groups. It's for this reason alone that despite the near certainty that the motion will fail, the PA will still likely pursue it. According to Israel's Yediot Ahronot News, the PA will attempt to use the recently passed nation-state law as proof that Israel is violating Chapter 2, Article 6 of the United Nations Charter. The article states that a member of the UN which has persistently violated the principles contained in the present charter may be expelled from the organization by the General Assembly upon the recommendation of the Security Council. Israeli officials have continued to support the nation-state law, however, as simply a law that ensures the Jewish character of the country. And as for the bid at the UN, Deputy Minister for Diplomacy Michael Oren released a statement reading that, quote, even without the nation-state law, the Palestinians' goal was and remains the same goal, to eradicate Israel from the map, and that this is not what peace looks like. This is what perpetuating the conflict looks like. Defense officials have reportedly announced the reopening of the Kerem Shalom crossing this morning after several days of calm. This is despite yet another 4 incendiary balloons from Gaza landing in southern Israel yesterday, which thankfully failed to cause any fires. Kerem Shalom was closed initially on July 9th to everything but medicine and food. A week later, fuel was stopped. Now, in addition to the crossing opening to full activity, 730 trucks, including 35 truckloads of construction material and fuel, were approved to go into the strip today. And Gaza's fishing area will also be extended to 9 nautical miles. Not everyone is happy about the outcome, though. Education Minister Naftali Bennett accused the defense minister of rewarding Hamas with a, quote, prize in return for 130 days of terror. This was in reference to the now 6-month-long March of Return protests. Bennett explained that, quote, this quiet will award Hamas total immunity to replenish tens of thousands of rockets threatening all parts of the country and allowing them to launch a war against Israel at a time and under conditions most convenient to them, ultimately leading to the opening of 2 highly dangerous fronts to the north and to the south, end quote. Lieberman, speaking this morning to Army Radio, however, said that Hamas has been significantly weakened over the last few days and understands that the next conflict would be much harsher. He continued that a ceasefire was never signed and that so long as there is quiet, Gaza residents will benefit. Along similar lines, some Israeli officials are now actually calling on the United States not to withhold funding from Palestinian refugee agency UNRWA, at least not in Gaza. This despite many other top ministers, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, supporting the idea that UNRWA supports terrorism. Still, now that UNRWA is practically broke, the organization fears that it may not be able to open schools for the 2018 school year. That means no jobs for thousands of teachers and staff, and over 500,000 children on the streets in the Middle East rather than in school. A situation that Israeli security and diplomatic officials say might deteriorate the humanitarian situation, in Gaza especially. Elsewhere in the West Bank, IDF forces arrested 21 Palestinians in overnight raids, Monday to Tuesday. They also shut down an illegal gunsmithing shop and seized all the tools inside. Some riots broke out in response to the raids, with Palestinians throwing rocks, Molotov cocktails, and homemade explosives. The IDF used non-lethal crowd dispersal methods to end the riots, and no Israelis were reportedly injured. Later, yesterday, Israeli troops arrested 3 Palestinians outside the Ilon Moreh settlement near Nablus. The suspects were armed with 4 pipe bombs and were spotted by military surveillance. Once arrested, the trio were handed over to the Shin Bet security officials for questioning. In another case yesterday, 2 pipe bombs were thrown at Rachel's tomb in Bethlehem. Thankfully, though, the police said that the bombs failed to go off and caused no injuries. 4 construction workers have died from on-the-job accidents this week, bringing the total death toll of workers in Israel to 28 just this year. That's a 43% rise over last year, according to Haaretz. One worker who was electrocuted last week on the job died of his injuries Tuesday, and on Monday, 3 construction workers, 2 Palestinian and 1 Chinese, were killed at 2 different sites. Police have opened investigations into all the deaths and have detained at least 4 in connection. In the first accident on Monday morning, 2 Palestinian construction workers from the West Bank fell from scaffolding on the 15th floor of a site in Rosh Ha'ain, Israel. The Electra construction company, which oversees that site, has been warned at least 10 times by the Labor Ministry since 2012 for defects found at their construction sites. Then later in the day, the Chinese worker fell to his death at a site in Lod while plastering. Unfortunately, this is an ongoing phenomenon in Israel, and the government in Beijing has already expressed outrage over the frequency with which Chinese workers are killed in Israel. As far back as May of this year, the Chinese government had already barred its migrant laborers from working at least 36 Israeli projects. Further, Israel's largest workers' union, Histadrut, is planning for both a labor dispute as well as a general strike in October. Histadrut's chairman, Avi Nissenkorn, told Yediot Ahronot News that, quote, "In Israel, an employee's life has become worthless," end quote. And Reuven Ben Shimon, the founder of the Accident Prevention Forum, said that, quote, "The bloody price of the construction industry attests to the ongoing lawlessness and helplessness of the enforcement authorities and the Israeli government." He also pointed out that just in payments to victims and their families alone, this issue is costing taxpayers over 4.5 billion shekels per year. Over the past 15 years, over 500 construction workers have died in Israel on the job. New safety mechanisms are and have long been urgently called for.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.